A young girl born in Africa looked up at the night sky. The vastness of it, the depth of it, felt like it was drawing her in. It was just so vast, so awesome, so big. She knew if she could just get out there and explore, there was so much more to be known. On Sundays, she would go with her father to the local bookstore, and after tea and cake, she would make her way every time to the space section where she would take out books, paging through them for ages, looking at pictures of stars and dreaming. This little girl also believed that space was for people from America who could join NASA, and not for people like her from countries in Africa. This little girl is not me. Today, I would like to tell the story of someone who inspires me, someone I greatly admire. She is the mission director of the Africa2Moon project. She is my dear friend and collaborator, soon-to-be Dr. Carla Sharpe Mitchell. Carla was working in finance, a single mother, and found herself without a job. She knew that this was the point where it was make or break. She would shift now from her passion for space to creating a career out of her love for space at this moment. At the same time, South Africa was announcing pipeline plans to build a South African space program, and she immediately, after reading the newspaper article, contacted the man leading the charge and scheduled an appointment with him. As the story goes, she marched into his office and said, "Is this real estate or is this real space?" He laughed and said, "This is real space," and immediately involved her in the plans for the South African space program. They went on to establish in 2009 the Foundation for Space Development Africa, and in fact, after passing the necessary legislation, the South African National Space Agency was established the next year in 2010. Carla realized that to pursue her career in space, she would need credentials, and she set her sights on the International Space University, which was based in Europe. Which, without knowing how she would manage or how she would afford it, she applied and joined the first cohort of students with the International Space University to do her executive MBA in 2009, and the first few modules were in the Isle of Man. Somehow she scraped together the money to do the first two modules, but then realized she wouldn't be able to afford completing the MBA from South Africa, especially paying in South African rands, and so she realized she would have to move abroad to earn foreign currency. So based on her contacts made through the ISU, she and Josh moved to the Isle of Man, a cold place far away from home, where she had a place to stay free for a month, and a tentative job that actually fell through soon after she arrived. So she found herself in an unknown place, far from home, alone with her young boy, and wondering what she would do next. But then she met a South African who had an ad agency who offered her a job as the tea lady. With the minimal amount of money that she got from this position, she managed to find a tiny apartment for herself and Josh. She managed to get enough money for food and to complete the next modules. Then it was announced that the next module would take place in the United States. Carla sighed and realized she would not be able to go on. One of her classmates then called her excitedly and said, "We'll see you in the US next week." And she said, "Actually, I'm going to have to pull out of the program. I can't afford financially to go on." They hung up the phone. Just 1 hour later, her classmate called her back and said, "We'll see you in the US, Carla. The entire class has pitched in to fund your and Josh's trip to the United States, as well as your accommodation for the rest of the MBA in the United States." So Carla's path to her executive MBA with the International Space University was paved by the kindness of strangers and fueled by her passion, her dare to believe that she could participate and contribute to humanity's future in space exploration, and they graduated in 2010. At this time, Carla was part of the organizing committee, remotely still from the Isle of Man, where South Africa hosted the world's largest and most prestigious space event, the International Astronautical Congress, and this is the chief NASA administrator at the time, Charlie Bolden. This was really an important move for Africa and South Africa entering the space community, and Carla at this time decided she needed to move back home to South Africa. But again, single mother, cash-strapped, in the Isle of Man alone with Josh, she wondered how she would go forward. She had lunch with a friend and explained her situation. The next morning, Carla woke up to a call from a travel agent telling her that her friend had purchased a ticket for her and Josh to return back to South Africa. Carla saw then a position advertised for the business development manager for the Square Kilometre Array radio telescope. She realized this was as close as she could get back in South Africa to participating in the space industry, and she applied for the job. During the 3-month interview process, she lived in the back spare room of a friend, sharing a single bed with her son Josh while she went through the interview process for this job. Needless to say, Carla got the job as the business development manager for the SKA South Africa. Amongst her tasks were the strategy and funding for building the precursor array to the SKA in South Africa, as well as, importantly at that time, she was reflecting on the opportunities and the potential for large-scale space infrastructure to positively impact developing economies like those in South Africa and beyond, and also to impact the lives of people living in these places. This went on to be the topic of her PhD thesis, which was accepted earlier this year. And amongst the conversations she was having while they were building the Meerkat precursor to the SKA array were, of course, around the new science possible with this instrument. So this is the most highly resolved image ever taken of the center of our Milky Way galaxy and the supermassive black hole there. Scientists will be analyzing this data for decades to come. But amongst the conversations about doing radio astronomy from Earth were the challenges of radio frequency interference. So electrical technology produces radio frequencies that interfere with the ability of such telescopes to measure the extremely faint radio signals coming in from space. And while it was already known that the far side of the moon is a great place from which to do radio astronomy, it took Carla's ingenious idea to revolutionize the way we may implement such a scheme. So this is data from the first radio astronomy instrument that was orbiting the moon, and that blank area you see in the middle is an indication of the radio frequency interference-free zone behind the moon, essentially on the far side of the moon, where radio interference from Earth, the natural auroral emissions as well as technological emissions are blocked. Also, the emissions of the sun are blocked. So how could humanity go about putting a telescope on the far side of the moon? Well, first of all, at that time, nobody had yet landed on the far side of the moon. It took the Chinese National Space Administration a few years ago to achieve that goal. And furthermore, the typical instruments that people would design to make these measurements would reach into the billions of US dollars and typically be really large instruments, difficult to deploy on the surface of the moon, requiring rovers and basically a huge scheme of complex instrumentation that cost in the range of billions of dollars. So at this point, Carla had an ingenious idea, or a harebrained scheme, as she would probably call it. She envisaged putting antennas, small loop antennas, inside spherical casings, essentially making an array of balls that would roll into positions on the surface of the moon far enough apart that together they could form a radio telescope big enough to detect the very faint radio signals that we were looking for on the moon. So history was in the making at this point, and ever since, Carla has been trying to get her balls to the moon. Yes, many jokes can and have been made about Carla's balls and trying to get these to the moon, but BALLS is in fact an acronym, Bounced African Lunar Low Spheres. So low as in low frequency, that's the low frequencies of radio wavelengths. Low as in low mass, Her idea about the balls encasing these small loop antennas is low mass, as well as low cost. I'll get to more on that in a moment. So where do I fit into all of this? I appear on the scene around about now, and we actually have a picture of the day we met back in 2015 at an event where astronaut Katie Coleman visited the Cape Town Science Center, along with, on the left, the chief scientist at NASA at the time, Dr. Ellen Stoffan, and that's myself and Carla, and the head of the Cape Town Science Center, Julie Cleverden. So Carla was in front of me, and I immediately eavesdropped on her conversation with the person next to her and heard that she worked at the SKA. At the time, I was looking to use the SKA data for my research on origins of life, and at the same time, I was also a candidate for the Mars One project, one of the 100 astronauts selected from around the planet to travel to Mars on a one-way trip. So let me preface the rest of this talk with this. What do you get when you cross an economist looking to positively impact lives in Africa through space technology and a quantum biologist looking towards life on Mars? Well, Africa's first moon mission, of course. So while a moonshot may for many people be an impossible dream, for me and Carla, the moonshot was in fact a compromise and a stepping stone to our grander visions to explore space, but the moon was where everything was happening and the natural next step for our collaboration and our dreams to explore space. So we carried on doing what we do, but this time with joined forces, speaking at events like the International Astronautical Congress in Germany. We soldiered through during COVID online, always promoting the idea that space exploration advances society, that developing space technology positively impacts economies, and most importantly, that exploring space develops our capability to dream and imagine what tomorrow may hold beyond the current reality that we are experiencing. So the real game changer came a few years later in 2023 when Carla received an email late one night from a friend in the US saying that China had opened up applications for proposals of projects to be sent to the surface of the moon. We immediately applied, and although our application to Chang'e 7 was unsuccessful, we regrouped, reapplied, and applied for Chang'e 8, which was to fly to the lunar South Pole in 2028. And we applied with Carla's balls now having a fairly great opportunity to fly to the moon. So the journey from Africa to the moon involved a lot of brainstorming, day after day of sitting with Carla, imagining how we would get this project off the ground, because once again, financial constraints were very much part of the discussion. So we had a lot of meetings, both locally and with the Chinese team online. We did a lot of calculations to estimate the capabilities of the telescope. We had more meetings, lots of meetings. We did some testing, so satellites in orbit around Earth actually get periodically warmed by the sun. Whereas on the surface of the moon, 14 days of night mean that temperatures plummet to negative 200 degrees Celsius. So testing our materials in liquid nitrogen is a great way to test the robustness of the rings that would make up the balls that would travel to the moon. We had more meetings. We looked at prototyping with the various companies and corporations that would be offering us their facilities. We had more meetings and more meetings. And finally, a huge milestone was when the Chinese team came to visit us in Cape Town to talk about the next steps and hear about our project proposal in person. Carla and I then soon traveled to China to participate in the Deep Space Exploration Conference, and we got one step closer to the moon with the Foundation for Space Development Africa signing on as a partner with the Deep Space Exploration Laboratory and the Chinese National Space Administration as a partner on the International Lunar Research Base. So actually next month, fingers crossed, we will be traveling to Shanghai. The Africa2Moon team has been invited personally, where the final payloads for Chang'e 8 will be announced. and then we will have 3 years left to prepare what could become Africa's first mission to the moon, a novel instrument aiming to do new science not possible from Earth, as well as a bunch of other objectives. So Africa2Moon is a radio telescope. The precursor mission in 2028 consists of 4 balls. We aim to look at the sky in a way that's not possible from Earth, do new science, but most importantly, Africa2Moon aims to demonstrate the power of collaboration. So this is a small subset of our team who are based in South Africa, Africa, and around the world, all of whom volunteer their time for the project. This is over and above their regular day jobs. These people are driven by Carla's vision, first of all, her ability to rally a team, and a vision for advancing Africa's participation in space exploration through what could become Africa's first mission to the moon. The power of collaboration is also demonstrated through our multiple organization partners. This is just a subset of them with whom we've already signed memorandums of understanding. A lot of organizations in Africa who would like to participate have been invited on board, because this is really a mission that we believe all Africans should share in, a way to symbolize a future where imagination and dreams play an active role in a unified, grand vision for exploration by all humanity on Earth. So besides the novel technology demonstration, the new science that we hope to achieve, the perhaps most critical aspect of the Africa2Moon project is the inspiration that we hope to share. So with the Africa2Moon team, we envision that when billions of children in Africa and around the world look up at the night sky, they feel a sense of wonder and excitement about this exciting era of space exploration that we are participating in. We are scheduled to build the first permanently inhabited bases beyond Earth on the moon in the coming years. But most critically, and because of Carla's vision and her daring approach to engaging in space exploration, we envision that the billions of children in Africa and around the world look up at the moon and the night sky and feel not only a sense of participation in this era of space exploration, but a feeling of belonging in this beautiful cosmos in which we find ourselves. So thank you for listening. Wish us all the best for Shanghai next month, and thank you very much.